I'm sure a lot of you have seen the crazy meme going around commemorating a so-called narco monkey called El Changuito, or the little monkey if my Spanish isn't way off, which it often is. First people thought it was a fake, before authorities confirmed that not only was the monkey, who's wearing a mini flak jacket and a khaki cartel outfit, he was real, but that he was killed in a shootout between members of the La Familia Michoacana cartel and government forces, in which 11 people died. The shootout happened in the town of Texcaltitlan, I'm sorry about my pronunciation, around 60 miles south of Mexico City last week, when police stormed a La Familia stronghold. 10 were killed on the spot, and another man died later of his injuries. 3 officers were also wounded. El Changuito, a spider monkey who was born just last year, was found with his arms outstretched, as if holding his owner, a man in his 20s, who was carrying El Changuito by the shoulders when the bullets struck him. Changuito was wearing the bulletproof vest, khaki overalls, and a nappy when he died. A police statement confirmed that, quote, a primate was killed at the scene, which was presumably owned by a criminal who was also killed at the scene. An autopsy will be carried out on the animal by a veterinarian specialised in the species. A subsequent meme, disseminated on social media, that I guess you've all seen, lamented that, quote, it wasn't your turn, friend, adding, rest in peace. Officers seized 20 R-15 type large caliber weapons, plus pistols, ammo, 5 vehicles, bulletproof vests, military style uniforms, and communication from the raid, which cops described as, quote, a legitimate use of force against the, quote, heavily armed group. I'd say the heavily armed part's pretty much true. But El Changuito's tragic demise is just the tip of a wave of cartel violence that, under the government of Andrés Manuel López Obrador, or AMLO, is reaching its worst level in years. The continued disappearance and possible death of El Mencho, head of the feared Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or CJNG, is helping to ignite a war between rivaling cartels in the agricultural heartland states of Jalisco and Michoacan, where La Familia are based. Not only are these states home to vital logistical lines, railways into the city of Guadalajara, and Pacific seaports where vast quantities of Chinese fentanyl precursors are coming, it's also home to the world's largest avocado market, which cartels are taking over, one dispossessed and terrorized farmer at a time. Since Mexico launched its own drug war in 2006, over 340,000 people have been murdered or disappeared. So bad is cartel violence in some Mexican states that civilians are arming children to fight would-be killers. And wildlife is playing a huge, huge role. El Changuito represents a cartel fascination for exotic animals that goes all the way back to Pablo Escobar's hacienda and the imported hippos that still run wild around some parts of rural Colombia today. I've even visited a zoo in Florida myself, run by a guy who used to traffic coke for the mob, a convicted murderer who was suspected of feeding his victims to the animals. And that was during my time reporting on Joe Exotic, of course. But tigers are a favoured pet of the narco underworld's rich and infamous. Last week, social media blew up with videos of a 450-pound Bengal running the streets of Tequila on the borders of Sinaloa and Nayarit states. In one video, a woman films the predator stalking along an urban street, saying, quote, be quiet, it might even come close. Authorities, though, said the tiger's claws and fangs had been removed, and a man can be seen later in the video casually tossing a rope over the tiger's neck and leading it away. And even that follows an incident on Sunday, June 5th, when a man was fatally wounded by a captive tiger in Periban, Michoacan, which is deep in avocado territory. In a social media video, the guy stands outside an enclosure, beckoning the tiger towards him, trying to feed it with one hand and reaching into its cage to stroke it with the other. Bad idea. The tiger then swirls around and bites the man's arm, refusing to let go, causing injuries grave enough that he later died in hospital. Incidentally, this is almost exactly what happened when I visited the King's Romans casino in Laos a few years back. I stumbled on a shit-ridden tiger enclosure only for my photographer, friend, the great Chen-Chi Chang, to try taking shots the next morning before one swiped him, knocking him to the ground, burying its claws in his arm, and trying to get his head. I mean, if he'd fallen forwards instead of backwards, he would have pretty much died. It was scary. Narcos love exotic animals like tigers and monkeys as macho status symbols. Jose Luis Montenegro, the author of Narco Juniors, The Power's Heirs in Mexico, told Vice News recently that, quote, panthers, tigers, and jaguars are the most common. The more exotic they are, the more attention they draw. But these are more than bling. They're big business too. The value of illegal wildlife trade has been estimated between 7 and 23 billion per year, making wildlife crime one of the most lucrative illegal businesses on the planet. Animals can easily fetch six figures, sending profit margins soaring. Plus, there are legal and practical limits on how much authorities can search wildlife shipments, making them the ideal cover for drugs. According to the UNODC, nearly 6,000 different species of flora and fauna have been seized between 1999 and 2018. So you can imagine that's just ramped up since 2018 as well. Says Crawford Allen, the North American head of watchdog Traffic, quote, you have cases where there are drugs hidden in false compartments within crates containing live venomous snakes, and written on top of it says venomous snakes don't open. So no customs guy is going to want to open that. Van der Feldbrad Brown of the Brookings Institute, friend of the show and an amazing source on black markets all around the world, has been campaigning for a long time for authorities to more closely track the parallel underworlds of drugs and illegal wildlife. This year, Feldbrad Brown produced a report analysing cartels' movement into the seafood trade. First, they moved totoaba, which is a large marine fish, and rosewood, a timber used for high-end furniture, via the ports. Soon, though, they realised they had a huge potential market in China where, for example, totoaba bladders are ground into traditional medicines. I do it all the time. Then they spread into the extortion of fishers of low-value produce like corvina, similar to the way they've taken over agricultural industries elsewhere, like the avocados. According to Feldbrad Brown, the Sinaloa cartel has even moved into more mainstream, lucrative seafood markets like scallops and lobster. And there's always the jellyfish, geoducks, and other East Asia-specific delicacies exported by the likes of Gan Jianbing, the Wenzhou money launderer we featured in our recent episode about Chinese launderers and the cartel fentanyl trade. And some of that money is going back and forth, of course. Some people are trading seafood for precursors, washing precursor money with seafood. It's a whole ecosystem these days. A lack of international law enforcement cooperation and government inaction is to blame, says Van der Feldbrad Brown. Not many people really care about illegally kept tigers or monkeys, unless sadly they're the subject of a shitty Netflix series. At minimum, Feldbrad Brown's report concludes, the Mexican government must become willing to protect Mexico's first and last resort protectors of wildlife, environmental activists and NGOs, with a far greater commitment that is exhibited so far. And dozens of environmentalist activists in Mexico have been killed since the turn of the 21st century. Feldbrad Brown even alleges in a recent report that the Sinaloa organization is in the process of opening its first formal seafood processing plant, hiring employees. And it's like we always say on Underworld, first you get the spider monkeys, the jaguars, the tigers, and the cocaine, and then you move into scallops. That's how you make your money. Anyway, that's the story about how El Changuito's death isn't really just about El Changuito's death at all. Descansa en paz, buddy.